Awesome. How are you?
Good. Look at this nice setup.
I know I've got the mood lighting on here, but the camera I have, it seems like it doesn't do particularly well in low light, so it's like an 80s low res kind of mood in here
Yeah,
for whatever
super
reason.
super low res interview. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I know I was playing around with Zoom and I'm like, God, Zoom is so bad. But hey, I'd put some like lights over here to just like illuminate my face a little bit more. It's just got this like grain going on, but
Yeah, yeah. That's the one thing I'm lacking in here as well. It's like a good camera light, but I don't know.
mhm,
One of these I've recorded so far, I'm like learning a little more and more, so and it's not
perfect.
meant to be overly formal anyways. But yeah, man, how are you doing?
Good.
Have you been? I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, I can't complain. Yeah. I think I hit a decent stride this month, last month, and executing some work and doing some fun stuff, just kind of like stuff I've never thought I'd ever work on. So it's pretty cool. Just getting out there, meeting people, exploring. Things have been pretty good. How about yourself?
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't complain too much. I'm just yeah, winding down on work a little bit. Um if people are listening, we're recording this 2 days, basically a day and a half before Thanksgiving. Um so yeah, pretty much just in holiday mode, kind of unwinding and spending time with family, which is always good.
Most
But
important thing.
yeah, awesome, man. Well, cool. Yeah, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're very busy and it's a little bit late here. But yeah, I was curious to ask you a little bit more. I guess talk to you in a way that's a little bit more formal because we've hung out a few times and we've kind of gone to some design museum events in the area, but I don't think I've ever really heard too much about like your career in depth or kind of understanding like the full trajectory of your story. So I'm like really curious to hear about that. I know I've told you this before, but the where I kind of first came across your work um was actually I was really young. I was still in school. It was like 2013 or 14. And I remember I was putting together a presentation for the Student Merit Awards. And it's funny, 2014, it doesn't seem like that long ago, but I guess it's been 10 years. Um,
Yep.
and I like the internet was around, but I feel like industrial design's presence wasn't as there weren't as many resources as there are now. And
Hmm.
I remember there were like three merit presentations I could find, and it was like Matthew Chodo's, um, Emmanuel Carrillo, and then yourself. And I remember like your work really caught my eye, and I remember like really putting a lot of pressure on myself because your work stood out so much. It was kind of like the bar that I set to sort of like measure myself against. Um, but yeah, man, it's yeah,
It's
always
that's
been like
good to
stellar
know.
work.
That's good to know. Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I don't think you've ever mentioned that. And like you said, back then there was stuff, on the internet. But I think it was kind of like that where was it like an infancy. Like there's resources. Like if you looked for stuff, you can find stuff. But as far as like, merit presentation resources and what presentations to look like and all those things, that was I thought that was difficult to find myself. So, when I went digging for that stuff, I don't know who I was inspired by, but I found a bunch of stuff. So I'm glad that that resonated or reached somebody. That's good. That was the point of that, was to help others as well. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's I remember there it was like very loose guidelines. It was like, okay, you can talk about three projects, but there wasn't really too much guidance beyond that. So just trying to figure out like, okay, what is a good presentation? What is a bad presentation? And I think when you're young, it's like you're just trying to figure out like what is good design? What should I be showing or not showing? And even that process
Hmm.
is I think it's still difficult for people sometimes, but
It's it's uh it's a lot of equal parts anecdotal, subjective, objective. There's a lot of heritage, but where do we go from here? How do we learn from the past? And there's I've always found it like an age old, like what is good design to everybody. I feel like everybody's got their own perspective and opinion, and it's not just one thing. So it's always interesting to see other people's work, to see what angle they come in from.
Yeah, that's true. Or even just like when you're trying to figure out like your own voice, it's it's I think when
Absolutely.
you're younger, it's good to just kind of be taking in a lot of work, and you develop taste, and you develop perspective, and what you think is what stands out and what doesn't. Um but yeah, man, let's dive into it. So you sort of started out, you went to Wentworth, right? Wentworth Institute of Technology. Were you always a like a New England or Massachusetts native? Did you kind of grow up around here?
Yep. Grew up in Connecticut and came to Massachusetts to go to Wentworth Institute of Technology from 2007 to 2011. And since then, I've been in Massachusetts and kind of bounced around for work. Um, so once I graduated, I was very fortunate, and there was an opening at Bose Corporation. Applied for it, went through the interview process, um, got the job, which was great. I think really putting my all into my work and school and the timing and everything kind of worked out really well. And since then, I had worked for Bose for over a decade, and following Bose, I once I left I left Bose 2022 to pursue my own company since then. So it's been just over a year, but that's kind of my design lineage in Massachusetts.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then what was Bose like? Because I don't think we've ever really talked about this in depth. I hear all these interesting rumors in the area about what it's like working at Bose, and I know they have a like a pretty robust R&D department. Did you come in and kind of get assigned to like a specific category, or did they have you more as like a young designer just kind of floating around?
Yeah, I mean it's evolved quite a bit over time. So when I was hired in, they did specifically somewhat hire people to be in a department and focus on those departments. So I was hired for home entertainment, which at the time was more appropriate for the culture and the time and how they were kind of positioning themselves. So, and others would have been hired into either automotive or noise reduction technology, which is headphones. And so it was very specific, and you worked within that group. It was very specialized and focused. So you can kind of focus on that and grow with the team. So, but then over time, both started to evolve from a design standpoint where they a lot of the more senior designers and experience that had been there served as, I would say, like category lead roles, design directors, um, upper senior design level roles, and they allowed more of the junior designers to be a pool, so you can do more cross departmental design. You might work on headphones for 2 3 years and then a portable speaker or automotive the next couple of years. So they kind of kept it more fluid as they evolved in the design department.
Yeah, that's awesome. So one thing I haven't really asked too many people about, and I'm curious to hear like your perspective. um I feel like with a lot of industrial design like content, it tends to be consumed mainly by like students or younger designers who are looking to get their foot in the door. And I had someone contact me recently from my alma mater, and they were just asking me a lot of questions around like what to expect
Mm-hmm.
coming into the industry. Like, hey, as a first year like professional, what is the pressure going to be that's put on me? What's kind of going to be expected of me? How should I plan, or what can I, just what can I look for going in? um what how did you kind of get your start? Did they have you more in like a quantity role, just doing like tons of ideation, or did you kind of start getting your feet wet pretty early on with like the more the development side, or like what did that journey kind of like look like for you?
I think there's an evolution there, but I mean I think that's a great question, and there's a couple folds there. But for myself, the first couple months, I was just a helpful, supportive hand, and you got to see very quickly why they're professionals and what they do, and a lot of the people I worked with, immediately it was apparent to me that they knew so much more than I did, and they were very skilled and buttoned up. And I had talent, but talent can only get you so far. You really have to kind of know what you're doing too, and know the ropes. So for myself, I was definitely doing a lot of ideating, CAD modeling, rendering, definitely dabbling in some strategy. That was very new to me as far as how to kind of work a product through the system and for the marketplace. And then I was just starting to be exposed to a lot of other things, like for instance, just having such a rich culture of engineers, electrical, mechanical, acoustics, people kind of bouncing in and out. So you hear all these other conversations finally that you don't get to hear in volume in a school setting, right? So it was great to see and hear something really coming to life. So, and even like user experience, marketing, everybody um, kind of contributing to the program. But I would say also, for someone asking those questions, I think, in hindsight, one of the biggest things you can do is just your consistency and reliability and being dependable, when somebody gives you a deadline. Definitely aim for that deadline, but don't overpromise, underdeliver. Get it down. Be very timely. Be very reliable in how you get things done, the quality in which you get things done, and then just be an open book and a sponge, because there's so much to learn, really. And if people know that they can go to you to get the job done, you'll start getting more and more and more responsibility, and they will task you with more things that you're not necessarily accustomed to, but they know that you can handle.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember like when I had like my first job coming out of school, I remember getting asked the question for the first time, like getting an assignment or a task or whatever it is I had to do, and kind of getting that question of like, how long do you think it'll take you to, to work through this? And I feel like that's a question I still like really struggle a lot with. You know what I
Great
mean?
question.
That's just,
Yeah.
it's always hard to answer that with design. I feel like because there's so many, potholes and pits, and you kind of never know where a project's going to go. I feel like I've had things that I think will take a week, and you can knock it out in 2 days. And then sometimes you think you can knock something out in a week, but you get slammed with meetings, and it ends up taking, twice the amount of time you thought.
hmm
Um, but yeah, I still struggle with that question
I think I
a
think
lot.
that's also the other factor, was the time management. That's something I personally struggled with coming out of school, because there's always that air of like, you don't really have people watching your clock, right? And it's up to you to get something done. A lot of people kind of crawl over the finish line in school to get things done. There's miraculously some very timely people, but it's something that in the working world, not everybody has all the time in the world, and everybody has different lives. So uh, I think that's one way also to garner respect and credibility, is your timeliness and quality at the same time. Both always difficult to achieve when you're trying to strive for something that's unheard of. That's one of the things at Bose was, we're always making something that doesn't exist, right? So just like a lot of other places. But yeah, I think timeliness is a huge thing.
Yeah, for sure. So when you sort of came into Bose, what was the team makeup there like? Because I feel like industrial design can vary so much company to company as far as like the roles and responsibilities and sometimes the process. Like you mentioned, working with UX designers, which like 10 years ago sounds like it was probably a much more specialized field than maybe it is today.
Mhm.
Were you pretty kind of, I'm trying to think what the right word is for this. Were you attached to sort of all stages of like NPDL? Like were you designing and then a part of development and then a part of launch, or did design kind of live more within like a silo there?
I think that's one of the uh, biggest reasons I realize why I'm so fortunate to have kind of like grown up as an industrial designer at Bose is they truly at one point really hand you the torch and you go from first sketch to last product off the line and you see it all the way through. So you are really living the process. So but within that process, um, you really learn how to leverage your colleagues and and trust the process and their expertise. So and really understanding why people are put in a position to make a product better. So everybody contributes, everybody has an opinion, everybody had a perspective, but especially like you said, like 10 and it's been like 12 years since I started there, but throughout my time there at Bose too, they always had a respect for those positions. It's never been easy per se. Design is always you always have to be genuinely persuasive for the betterment of the product, but they always had a core set of user experience designers, user interaction, sorry, and making sure that that was apparent in the design and always working hand in hand because there's only so much you can do within a day, within a week, especially as an industrial designer, all the tasks, the meetings, the conversations, everything that goes down. So having that colleague right next to you saying like, does this feel correct? Is that visible enough? Is that indicating the right thing with that light? Like, are we, is that too much? Should we remove that? Is that redundant? Like all these little things that's you can collaborate on was wonderful.
Yeah, I feel like once you pair up with a user experience designer, as someone coming from the ID side, you learn so much so fast.
Oh yeah.
It's like part of it sometimes like category specific. Like, okay, I know, you're learning lessons over those for that first year, those first 2 years about kind of like how to handle speakers or audio equipment specifically, but you also start just picking up on all these tips and tricks of just like product design in general and like semantics and understanding like how to design something that looks like it should be doing the thing that it does. And I feel like those things are all super important. And I don't know that you necessarily learn things like that at a small company or at companies that don't have like mature UX teams that can guide you through that process. But yeah, that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, there's definitely a learning curve, and I don't know if I had mentioned it before, but as far as like advice to just people either looking for their first job or like just getting into the game, and it's always just always be a student, always be a sponge. Somebody knows something, they have an experience with something, and it's gonna drive or kind of steer your thoughts in a way that whether good or bad, it's not always right. But everybody has ideas that there might be a reason or a meaning behind it, especially when you're all kind of driving towards a collective purpose. But yeah, it's all communication at the end of the day, right? Design is clear, it's communicative, and it serves a purpose. So
Yeah, definitely. That's awesome. And then so you're there for 10 years. Did you move around a lot at the company, or did they have you just in sort of one department?
so yeah, like initially, it was really interesting because I was kind of like, so am I gonna just be in home entertainment for
Right.
and I think it was good. It was kind of a new beginning. They had unfortunately gone through some layoffs back in 2008, so they were kind of rebuilding the company. And I had gotten hired into 2011, and then they started kind of bringing in a lot of juniors, a lot of younger individuals, and just kind of rebuilding the spirit of the company and really kind of facing the industry. The industry was changing a lot. There were a lot of new competitors, a lot of people in different categories that were really kind of challenging Bose in a very good way, in a way where Bose wasn't the kind of the top name, and it really kind of made Bose reflect. So everybody was really fired up to make some great stuff to kind of get back on top, right? But as far as like career development goes, over time, a lot of those juniors and people that had been hired in around that time, and even people senior level, director level, a lot of people had known how it had gone over the past couple decades, right? And they're like, how are we going to make this refreshed from a team level? And even like the engineers, designers, everybody was like, I don't want to just do this one thing, right? And as much as you can become a subject matter expert to some extent, it might you don't want to be pigeonholed within a company that does a somewhat of a specific market, right? So it was great. At one point, I think we really saw a huge shift and a big mix up in a way where they trusted the talent that they had, they trusted the knowledge that they had, and they started letting people kind of like cross pollinate. And then I think at that point, we really saw even greater products because of the knowledge that, say, somebody in headphones or earbuds knew about materials and technology. They were thinking in a whole different realm than somebody who was doing something in like pro speakers, like stadium size speakers, or even portable speakers or something like that, right? So people were able to share knowledge that were not even talking to each other 5 years earlier. So it was an interesting time to see Bose evolve like that.
That's awesome. So were there things that you were learning or coming across? Like what would be the example? Like what would be things that were like what was being transferred? Was it just knowledge around like supply chain and suppliers and offerings for like CMF and some of that, or was it like were people using like different design processes between like the departments?
All the above. It was wonderful. I mean, I could just see even people that had been there, someone says, I don't know if we can do that. And then somebody else who'd probably been there the same amount of time in another department's like, no, I know a supplier, or I know you know, um, a material we can use, or a processy or something like that, and it was just, but everybody was very open and receptive. Obviously, there's a lot of vetting and there's a very thorough process there. So even if there's a wall at first, as far as a disagreement or a reluctance or something like that, I think people that generally work there want to create wonderful products, and they're very open-minded to learning about cool things and applying it well, because they have the intelligence and the skill, especially the engineers, to pull it off, right? They investigate and they do a really good job. So I think it was actually fun for everybody. I think everyone was learning again when they started doing that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then so that's great. And so you mentioned about a year ago you left to start your own studio. What sort of led to that decision, and how's that journey been for you?
So far, so good. It hasn't been, a walk in the park, but it's the challenge I've always wanted, and I always knew. I think there's something in me that I just uh, working for Bose was incredible, and like I wouldn't have had the confidence to go on my own unless I spent a good deal of time just learning the game, learning the industry, expanding my network. It's been so helpful. Everything that I was given there, as far as like traveling the suppliers, working with material scientists, even down to the metrology of the materials we're using, and there's so much to be said as far as the rigor and the discipline it takes to bring a product to market, that I got to do that enough not enough times. There's never enough time, so you can always learn, but I worked on at least 5 or 6 products that had made it to market, and I was like, okay, it's never going to be easy. That's one thing I learned. It's always going to be hard, even when you have a team of aces. It's difficult, right? There's always something. But I wanted to explore other avenues, and I found that at Bose, right, I was working on headphones, speakers, earbuds, automotive. There's always some side program that you're like, well, this doesn't have to do with sound, but Bose was always interested in exploring and researching things. So, but I thought it would just be a quicker way for me to, one thing I learned was, I'm just going to learn more if I explore more, right? And I was doing that at Bose, but I wanted to kind of ramp that up and kind of go into hyperspeed. And I always found, even at Bose, one of the best ways to learn. My managers and directors, they would just throw you into the fire, and it was great because you never thought you were ready, but a couple weeks later, a couple months later, you start accepting this is your responsibility and this is your role, and they trust you, and there's a reason they hired you. So I had to tell that to myself at one point. I had to say, look, I've done this a couple times. You're never going to be fully ready, but for myself, it was just it's a growth process and an exploration process that I really want to help other people. At the end of the day, products can change lives. You can improve lives, and you're creating experiences to better the consumer's lifestyle. So I just wanted to get involved with other things and see what came from it.
Yeah, that's great. So you decide to depart. Um, what is the next day like? Did you have projects that you had kind of pre-spun up beforehand, or was it just a cold plunge, kind of hanging out around the house and figuring out what was next, or like what is kind of that run? What did that runway look like?
Very cold plunge. It was like a polar bear swim. Um,
Yeah,
but that was I had already mentally prepared myself for years. At one point, I just had to do it, and I knew something told me it was time. It's not like I'm overly successful a year or so out, but this time last year was probably 2 months after I had left, and that time last year, I was a little burnt out though. I think after 10, 11 years at one company and really giving it my all, and I really respected Bose, so I never didn't show up and give it my all. But I think at one point I was a little fried, and I think it was also kind of a release of you see a lot of numbers spitting in your head of the things you've been working on, and you kind of see what's coming down the line as well as far as a pipeline of innovation and the future of the company. And I think for myself, I needed to pivot and do something else um to just release myself from one thing and go to the next. As far as projects go, I had a couple personal projects, nothing lined up, so I had to kind of start from scratch and teach myself how to get out there and put myself in front of people and present myself and tell them I have value and skills, and I have the means of getting their product to market.
yeah, that's awesome. So you sort of you're able to depart, and then the first order of business is kind of spinning up a couple of these personal projects. Um,
Mhm.
was one of them the chess set, or were there precursors to the chess set?
Well, the chess set that was there's it was all new personal projects, things like, hey, uh here's a designer I've worked with in the past has an idea, let's kind of noodle it. So I had probably one or two of those in the margin, just kind of like hanging around, and things we weren't making money on, just kind of working on. But I learned very quickly, and as you would think, like you got to have money coming in to even work on the side projects, right? So I really had to quickly get on my toes and start finding clients. However, like the chess set, that was something I just did. That was kind of a personal grind, labor of love, where uh, at one point had an idea, had a nice job at Bose, wasn't worried about money. Um, I had a wonderfully challenging job as far as like innovation goes, and I was learning every day. So there's no reason for me to leave or kind of do something else, I was very satisfied. So I just wanted to do something on my own to kind of also prove to myself that I can take more steps than I was allowed at Bose. So I started realizing, everybody's a job for a reason, right? You have like material procurement, plastics engineers, global supply management. You got all these people making deals, marketing, all these conversations that you're sort of part of. You hear them, but you don't necessarily have a hand in. And in my mind, I wanted to be a little closer, even closer to the process of developing a product on my own. So the only way I felt as though I was going to be able to do that was try to do something on my own. So the chess set was kind of me dipping my toes in the water to just figure out more than I didn't know already. And it definitely turned out that way.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, which is I feel like there's this weird this this weird element to working in like a large corporate org where the responsibility of whether a product does well or not is kind of murky. Like sometimes it's like some companies
Mm-hmm.
will really like feel like design kind of owns like the performance of a product, and sometimes you'll be sitting in design and you'll feel like you knocked it out of the park. You have something that is, that you've put out in the market that's picking up red dots and idea awards and whatever else, but for some reason it just isn't doing well, and maybe that ball lies in marketing. But I think regardless, it always feels like there's kind of this like lack of control once something finally launches. Whereas like when you're running your own business, like all those elements are sort of completely on you, which is interesting. But
Mm-hmm.
I would love to talk about the chess set.
Sure.
Excuse me, we're recording this. I'm actually a little bit sick, so apologies if I cough a bit. But so the chess set, you had kind of given me a little bit of the inception story behind it in the past, but I can't remember the full story, but it was this really interesting insight you had. I think, were you at ICFF when you had sort of initially like come up with the idea for that?
Actually, yeah, I forgot about that portion of the story, but it was before ICFF. I just simply went by a cement chess table one day in Little Italy, Boston, and just figured to myself, well, you got to bring your pieces anyways, whether it's in a bag, in a box, whatever. And I was like, that'd be so cool if you could Russian doll a chess set. I was like, that's ridiculous, right? The geometry, the symmetry, all this stuff. And then it was just something in the back of my head. I like to give myself design challenges. I don't, I have a lot noodling around in my head. I don't talk about them. And that was one of them that somehow kept spinning. I was like, is it? Can you do it? And at one point I just started, if you ask anybody who was living with me at the time, I just started cutting up Bristol board and paper. And then I was like, oh, well, figured some cool things out, but now I got to put some thickness on them. And it was just kind of a fun side project. And then the ICFF, I went to the ICFF. Bose had sent us there. They're always finding ways to inspire us with home furnishings and the home, because anything you make there has to live with everybody's lives. So it wasn't just consumer electronic shows. It was home living types of shows, and I think that really kind of got us thinking about materials and the way things integrate into people's lives. And the very last booth that I saw was a chess set, and I was like, that's incredible that this person comes here with a chess set. Everybody's got chairs, lights, tables, all this stuff. He's the only chess set. And I was like, I guess that is, it's a home furnishing, right? Of sorts. It's something you might display that works with your decor and the style of your home, right? So that kind of inspired me a little bit too, to also be like, is it a valid channel of retail? I started looking into all the chess sets in the world, and it's a very interesting lane of design. So that kind of inspired me as well, where it's something that's got so much history, so much heritage. It's stood the test of time. Uh, Design is intriguing in that regard, where especially consumer electronics, you might design something, and if it lives for 5 years, you're lucky if it lives for 10 years. You're maybe fortunate if it lives for 2, 3 years before it gets cultured out, socially cultured out. New technology comes along, things are going so fast where chess kind of lives forever. in a sense. So to me, that was very inspiring as far as longevity of a product. So I started taking all these elements and these values and pushing myself to figure something out, because I figured, well, if I want to design something with longevity and speaks highly of function and quality, I think this is kind of a perfect storm. So it had a lot of symbolic value, in my opinion, that I thought it was the right thing to design and debut my company with.
Yeah, that's great. I feel like and for people who haven't seen it, the chess set has this like interesting it's like a travel chess set, which when I say out loud, I always think of those boards that sort of fold in half and then all of the pieces just kind of sit loose on like the hollow cavity in the middle. But the way Dave has done it is it's almost like you mentioned it, it's the Russian nesting dolls. I think they're called like
Mhm.
what Matryoshka dolls. Um
Babushka dolls, I
yeah,
believe.
yeah. But the pieces all kind of nestle in within each other, which I've never seen a chess set that's done that before, but it makes total sense. Like they all the pieces kind of have that tapered shape to them. So it's kind of like one of those lightning in a bottle. Like what it's one of those designs where you look at it and you kind of kick yourself where it's like, why has nobody done this before?
That's what I was thinking. I was just like, well, if I could respect the game, I think the most important thing for me was, I would see $1,000 sets, $500 sets, $30 sets, and they might be fancy and beautiful, nice materials, wonderful designs, but there's nothing better than just like a very plain wood set or even a $15 plastic set that communicates what each piece is meant to do and how you're supposed to play the game. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be distracted. You don't want to be second guessing what each thing does. So for me, I had to really dig deep and functionally respect the the visceral effect of the game, the tactile, the touch, the feeling, the visual look at a glance, and kind of wrap that up in something that's fairly novel. But there's just like design, to me it was a massive um just exercise for myself, where there's proportions, there's scale, there's negative space, there's all sorts of little um dimensional rules, there's hierarchy, there's all this stuff that every design in this world benefits from. And I didn't want to bastardize the game, but I knew that I had a big challenge, because the pieces were so unique and unlike other sets. But one of the ultimate benefits too was putting away in order, taking them out in order, and like other unlike other sets, sometimes things are not so tidy. Even if they're tidy, it takes up a lot of space. So there's a lot of challenges and but benefits from overcoming those design challenges.
Yeah, I feel like it's a deceptive project too, because on one hand it's like, oh, I'll design a chess set, but then you start breaking it down and realizing like all the different pieces and then the quantity of each piece. I mean, I guess you can at least mirror the design between like the two sides, but
Yeah, it was finding out, how do I manage the symmetry and how do I manage the multiples, right? You got eight pawns, two of everything, one queen, one king. It's just like, how do you manage that asymmetry? How do you manage the symmetry? How do you keep the sizes appropriate, so it's not like the pawns are too small and the king is way too big? So it's, people can sniff out disproportionate design, and people can sniff out compromises. So I really had to be as deliberate as possible with my approach, and get to a result that yielded something that people wouldn't um look at and say, oh no, I'm not interested. You want somebody to be really compelled by something, but also more compelled to actually use it and to actually play the game with it.
yeah, that's interesting. Did you end up playing a lot of chess while you were designing it, or were you so focused on the set that you didn't have the time?
Too much. I actually went into a very unhealthy spiral of playing too much chess. I think I was playing at least 5 or 6 online games a day, but like, I don't like to lose, so it wasn't like I was playing them too quickly. But I thought it was healthy at the time, but on top of having a full-time job at Bose and trying to launch a product on Kickstarter, or Indiegogo, and get something real in this world on my own, and playing chess and in life, I was definitely burning the candle on both ends of the stick at the time.
That's awesome. And then I've never asked this question before, but like how is it made? Are the pieces machined or
That's a great question. They are metal injection molded, so
oh
it
okay.
was a process that I had just come across. I think it's a fairly common process, just more expensive, but better quality, and there's lots of longevity in the parts. So there's a lot of benefits to it. So when I started learning more about it, it actually gave me the leverage to do a lot of the tricks that I'm playing with the parts themselves. So if you cut a cross section through them, they're not all even wall thicknesses, right? And there's areas where it's locally thinner than others, and there's a lot of kind of surface trickery where if you kind of look at it, you think something is just normalized or simplified, but there's a lot of intentionality in the surfacing to kind of dodge at the last moment the other piece, or things like that. So and metal injection molding allows metal to flow like plastic and form very robustly. And also I was able to integrate a magnetic component where they magnetically snap back to a base, which is a very delightful uh user experience too, where it's not just once you stack them, they're not falling apart, they magnetically click to something. And metal injection molding allowed me to use stainless steel that was ferrous stainless steel, right? So it was all very intentional material use, very pure. It was able to do things that I wouldn't be able to get away with in like in injection molding per se, or certain other processes. So I definitely had to kind of teach myself and come up to speed with other things I hadn't been using in previous jobs.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it sounds like it's a big learning project. Because yeah, I'd imagine at Bose you're doing a lot of injection molding, but not necessarily metal, and then not at like small scale manufacture. So it seems like you definitely took a lot away from it, which is cool. I forgot you said they're magnetic. Do they just magnetize to each other? Do they magnetize to the board as well?
So that was one of the things was um, I didn't want them to magnetize to each other, because then you'd have a poor playing experience where they might be clicking to each other on the board, right? And the board itself is leather, very intentional in itself as well. Leather being somewhat of a living fiber, right? It's going to relax over time. It's going to feel really good over time. So planning for the longevity of the product, it's actually going to get better. Um, However, also metal, you don't want it to scratch. A lot of players like to slide their pieces, or when they take a piece, kind of scoop the other piece and put their piece down. So I was trying to reduce the amount of clinking and clacking to minimize the kind of like the unsavory parts of the game if you're hitting on stimuli that people don't want and senses, right? So I was trying to create a nice dampened surface that plays well with the metal, so it's nice and quiet.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on one of these at some point. It seems really neat. Um, well, cool. So, yeah, so you have the chess set, and then what else has been going on with Etho? I think you've kind of done some work with different studios as well. Have you mainly been working with companies kind of in the Boston area, or have you branched out a bit?
Initially, I was very fortunate. I definitely tried to leverage my network, and being in the industry for almost a decade, or definitely a decade at that point. You know a lot of people, so you go down your list. You kind of ask people, hey, you got anything going on? Any way I can help you or support your team? And definitely was able to get some work in the Boston area initially, and then but from there I started to expand, because I know there's only so much you can do. There's only so much work certain companies may need. And there's a lot of people in this world. So I didn't want to kind of confine myself to this location where I had to start learning how to reach out to the globe, literally, and seeing what innovators are out there, what other companies are out there, and get myself out of my comfort zone and stop relying on word of mouth, stop relying on my immediate contacts, and expand and put myself in front of other people to show that I can help bring things to market. So it was definitely a growth opportunity for me to to move ahead, forge ahead, and just kind of get my name out there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's funny. I think to bring things full circle, you kind of started out, you got your undergrad at Wentworth, and then now you either are or were teaching at Wentworth, right?
Yeah, I did some teaching this year. I took the semester off to focus more on my company. It is definitely a time commitment. And but the beginning of the year I was fortunate to have been offered a role in teaching sketching to the sophomore class from some of my old professors, which was an honor to me that, individuals that taught me the value of design and how to really discipline myself in design were requesting my support, and I couldn't refuse. I thought that was a wonderful thing, and also for myself it was a challenge to be had, just because I realize how much time educators and teachers put into their work. And it's not just the class itself, right? It's the preparation, it's after hours, it's between classes. And the teachers I had were just always there helping out. So it was actually very intimidating and scary to me, more than what I was trying to do for myself, because you have to be very honest. It's very it keeps you in check, especially when you're molding younger minds who haven't been where you are. You have to really give them as much concise, valuable information as possible to be the best designers they can be. So to me, that was a wonderful challenge, and so I did that, and then I was able to over the summer help with the senior thesis as an advisor, and got a few students, 4 students to be exact. All had different challenges, so it was actually more in my lane, where I was able to help, like as a senior designer, as a design director of sorts, kind of steer people, keep the bumpers on, but it's their design. So you're starting to help people with time management and steer their thoughts, and come up with a robust strategy to find a solution that doesn't exist.
Yeah, that's awesome. Very cool. Um, well, awesome, Dave. I'm looking at the time here, and we've been talking for almost an hour, which is completely flown by. What do you have on the horizon? What's coming up next?
Well, I've been very fortunate. I think the back end of the year has been somewhat very good to me. I'm in a better place than I was last October, right? So when I had 0 clients and nobody knew who I was, and I was just starting to kind of raise my hand in the universe. And so I feel very fortunate that a lot of the hard work's paid off. And I think a lot of the seeds I've planted in the beginning of the year and the middle of the year, I'm starting to see kind of the ROI on the legwork. But I have to kind of keep my foot on the pedal, and just it's an amazing thing. You kind of sometimes you forget about the effort you're making and how it pays off in the end. But it's just my first year, and I just got to kind of keep my head up, and it's exhausting, right? It's you're your own boss, and you have no creative colleagues around you per se. So it's wonderful to, I think one thing that's helped is meeting people like yourself, right? Where somehow we cross paths this year. We've kept in touch. We go to design events together. We talk design, not even that anything really, but it's nice to start broadening my network just by reaching out. I've reached out to people on LinkedIn to ask them for advice, and people are so receptive. They'll hop on a call, even if they're in Germany, Australia, talk to so many people to get help. and support, and to learn from. I'll look for people that are 5 years ahead of me, 8 years ahead of me, 10 years ahead of me, and I think everybody's got to start somewhere. So I feel as though they remember when they're in my position, and but then after that, you kind of keep those conversations going, and um, it's the one thing I miss the most being in a company is you do have just in general a core set of colleagues around you that you could bounce things off of. And a big part of my process is my collaborativeness and really showing people and getting their opinion. So for myself, I think that's something I'm trying to figure out how to do that more with creative professionals. But at the end of the day, it's just got to keep grinding, got to keep hustling, and just keep progressing every day.
Yeah, yeah, it's challenging. It was one of the reasons I wanted to start doing more of these conversations and sharing them, because I feel like with I'm still at my job, and I feel like one of the kind of downsides of like doing personal work or working at things at home is that it can be, I think creatives in general can be like very insular, and we like to kind of like live in our own worlds to a certain degree. But
For
it's,
sure.
I think, like especially post pandemic and kind of the world we live in now, it's always easy to like just jump on a call and hang out, and even while you're working on something, and just kind of chat with people. And I feel like the industrial design community in particular always tends to be really friendly. I'm always amazed at people's willingness to just pick up the phone and chat or talk about design. But yeah, I haven't been to a community event in a while. I'm hoping I can
Hmm.
start getting out to more once we sort of get through the holidays, and workload lightens up a bit, and I can start getting out of the office a little bit more. I'm looking forward to taking more drives into the city.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's people are definitely more receptive than many may think. And if you propose a question like, for instance, between clients, I'm reaching out to people in the supply chain. I'm reaching out to vendors. I'm reaching out to logistics people. And just trying to get myself out of my comfort zone because I need these resources to help my clients succeed. But then, you reach out to someone, and um, an individual I reached out to a couple of weeks ago, she's wonderful. She's sending me all sorts of resources, and I think people are very passionate about what they do, obviously. And then when you talk to the right people, and you kind of cross pollinate in the industry, right, to create stuff. I think people really do want to help people, and especially now, right, with the more of a digital revolution and post pandemic, I think a lot more people are willing to hop on and talk and help, if it's time conducive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, awesome, David. Thank you. I really appreciate your time, and it's always great talking to you. I feel like I always leave feeling inspired and energized to jump into the next project. If people want to reach out or get in touch, where can they sort of find you online?
You can definitely check out my website, which would be Dave Fustino, FUSTINO.com. And you can reach out at Dave_Fustino, FUSTINO, at Etho, ETHO, .design. So Dave_Fustino at Etho.design. Those are two great ways to check out what I'm doing, and reach out to me. And also, LinkedIn. Let's connect.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And likewise, I'm always inspired. Ray for anybody who doesn't know Ray, he loves design and loves to, we will go to, check out a random piece of architecture or something. He's a very inspirational designer as well. And this is a great segment. So thank you very much. I really
Oh,
appreciate it.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thanks for the kind words, Dave. All right. Take care.
You as well. Have a good night.